My name is Michelle Reeves, and for 3 years I served as Senior Compliance Analyst at Gold Coast Technologies. 3 years of meticulous work, building systems that protected our company from regulatory nightmares. 3 years of late nights reviewing documentation, updating protocols, training staff on financial reporting standards. 3 years that culminated in a single, careless dismissal. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m. Subject line, Q3 Compliance Review, Team Assignments. I opened it expecting my usual role coordinating the audit preparation. Instead, I found my name conspicuously absent from the core team roster. In my place, Stephanie Winters, a junior analyst who joined our department 8 months prior. Competent enough, certainly eager, but lacking the institutional knowledge that made compliance work bulletproof. The email came from Gerald Hoffman, our Vice President of Operations. My direct supervisor. The man who'd praised my exceptional attention to detail during my last performance review. I stared at my screen, reading the assignments twice. Then 3 times. No mistake. I'd been deliberately excluded. I found Gerald in his office 20 minutes later, door half open, reviewing spreadsheets with the satisfied expression of someone who believes he's made a brilliant decision. Michelle. He glanced up, already dismissive. What do you need? I noticed I'm not assigned to the compliance review. I kept my voice level, professional. I wanted to clarify if there's been an oversight. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. The pose of a man preparing to deliver wisdom. No oversight. I'm making strategic adjustments to team composition. Stephanie will be taking lead on the audit coordination this quarter. Strategic adjustments. The phrase landed like a stone. May I ask why? I've managed every compliance review since I started here. I know our systems inside and out. Gerald's expression shifted, not quite a smirk, but close enough. Stephanie has a particular quality that makes her ideal for this work. She's sharper with details than you, frankly. More precise in her documentation approach. The words hung between us. Sharper with details than you. From the man who'd built his career on my analysis. Who'd presented my audit reports to the board as evidence of his departmental excellence. Who'd asked me to fix Stephanie's errors just last month because her documentation approach had missed 3 critical regulatory citations. I felt something click into place inside me. Not anger, anger burns hot and fast. This was colder. More calculated. I understand, I said simply. Thank you for clarifying. His eyebrows raised slightly, perhaps surprised by my composure. Good. Glad we're on the same page. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and opened my personal files. Not the shared drives. My own records. 3 years of observations, carefully documented discrepancies, small irregularities I'd flagged and been told to overlook. Instances where Gerald had insisted on certain reporting modifications that made our numbers look cleaner than reality suggested. I'd kept everything. Professional habit, really. In compliance work, you learn early that documentation protects you. Now it was going to protect me in a different way. Do you remember the first time someone underestimated you? That precise moment when you realized they'd mistaken your professionalism for weakness, your patience for passivity? I do. It was 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. The beauty of compliance work is its precision. Everything connects. Financial reporting, regulatory standards, internal controls, they form an intricate web of accountability. Disrupt one thread properly, and the entire structure reveals itself. Gerald had made his decision based on a fundamental miscalculation. He believed my value lay in my obedience, my willingness to smooth over his questionable judgment calls. He'd forgotten that I understood our systems better than anyone else in the building. That evening, I began my own review. Not of our company, I already knew our vulnerabilities. I reviewed Gerald himself. His expense reports going back 18 months. His approval signatures on vendor contracts. His modifications to my original compliance recommendations. The financial restructuring he'd championed that I'd advised against in writing. The internal audit findings he'd labeled as administrative concerns rather than substantive risks. Separately, each item appeared minor. Collectively, they painted a portrait of someone who viewed compliance as a suggestion rather than a requirement. I'd spent 3 years building safeguards. Gerald had spent 3 years dismantling them, piece by piece, whenever they inconvenienced him. Wednesday morning, I arrived early. The office was quiet, just security and the cleaning crew finishing their rounds. I logged into the regulatory reporting portal, access I still maintained despite Gerald's restructuring, and pulled the submission history for our last 4 quarterly filings. There. Third quarter, previous year. A modification timestamp that didn't match our internal approval records. Gerald had made a last-minute adjustment to our revenue recognition reporting, after I'd finalized the submission, without documenting the change or updating our supporting schedules. It was the kind of discrepancy that might slide past an internal audit. But an external regulatory review? That was different. That was exactly the kind of inconsistency that triggered deeper investigation. I pulled up the upcoming audit schedule. The State Compliance Office had announced enhanced scrutiny protocols this quarter, focusing on financial reporting accuracy. Our review was scheduled for next week. Perfect timing. I drafted an email to our external audit coordinator, copying the State Compliance Director. Professional, concise, expressing concerns about potential reporting discrepancies that may require additional documentation review before the official audit date. I attached a summary document, not accusatory, simply factual. Timestamps. Submission records. Noting the inconsistencies between our internal protocols and our actual filings. I included my direct contact information should they need clarification on any compliance procedures. Then I waited 5 minutes, reviewing the email 3 times. Checking every sentence for tone, accuracy, appropriateness. Finally, I clicked send. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. That's not quite right. Justice is a system best activated correctly. The response arrived Thursday afternoon. The audit team would be conducting a preliminary documentation review Friday morning, earlier than originally scheduled. They requested that all compliance personnel be available, along with department leadership. Gerald's office door was closed most of Thursday. Through the glass walls, I could see him on phone calls, his expression moving from confident to concerned to distinctly uncomfortable. Stephanie stopped by my desk around 3 o'clock. Have you heard about the audit changes? They're asking for all the original documentation, not just the summary reports. Gerald seems stressed. Audits can be stressful, I agreed mildly. Especially when there are discrepancies to explain. She lowered her voice. Between us, I've been finding some inconsistencies in the files. Numbers that don't quite match up between the internal records and what was submitted externally. I flagged them for Gerald, but he said they were just formatting differences. I looked at her carefully. What do you think they are? I think. She hesitated. I think maybe they're more than formatting issues. You should document your concerns, I suggested. Compliance work is all about documentation. She nodded slowly, understanding passing across her face. You already did, didn't you? I didn't answer directly. The audit will clarify everything. Friday morning felt different. The air in the office carried an electric tension, the kind that precedes thunderstorms. The audit team arrived at 8:30, 3 inspectors with briefcases and tablets, professional smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They set up in the large conference room. Gerald joined them, along with our CFO, Helena Cartwright, and the head of our legal department. I was called in at 9:15. Ms. Reeves. The lead auditor, a woman named Catherine Reynolds, gestured to a chair. We understand you submitted concerns about potential reporting inconsistencies. That's correct. Walk us through what you found. I did. Calmly, methodically, without editorial comment. I presented the timeline of submissions, the modification logs, the discrepancies between internal approvals and external filings. I explained our standard compliance protocols, the ones I designed, and where actual practice had deviated from those standards. Gerald sat 3 seats away, his jaw tight, arms crossed. Helena took notes, her expression unreadable. And you brought these concerns to your supervisor's attention previously? Catherine asked. Multiple times over the past year. I have email documentation of each instance. I pulled out a folder, physical copies, because sometimes paper carries more weight than pixels. My recommendations were consistently overruled in favor of what Mr. Hoffman termed more flexible interpretations of reporting requirements. More flexible. Catherine's tone was carefully neutral, but I caught the flicker in her eyes. In compliance work, flexible is a 4-letter word. The interview continued for 40 minutes. They asked detailed questions about our internal controls, approval processes, who had final authority over regulatory submissions. Every answer I gave was accurate, documented, and devastating. When they finally excused me, Gerald remained behind. I spent the afternoon at my desk, ostensibly working on routine tasks, actually listening to the subtle rhythms of crisis unfolding down the hall. Voices rising and falling behind closed doors. The CFO making urgent calls. Legal team members shuttling between offices with stacks of documents. Stephanie appeared again near the end of the day. They're interviewing everyone who worked on the quarterly filings. They asked me about the changes Gerald requested on the revenue recognition reports. What did you tell them? The truth. That he told me to adjust the numbers to better reflect operational reality and assured me it was standard practice. She paused. It isn't standard practice, is it? No. It's not. She sank into the chair beside my desk. I feel like I've been used. You have been, I thought. We both have. The difference is, I stopped allowing it. You did the right thing by being honest with the auditors, I said instead. That's all any of us can do. The weekend passed in strange suspension. I went hiking Saturday, something I hadn't done in months. Stood at a summit overlook and watched hawks circle in thermal currents, writing invisible structures with perfect precision. Systems within systems. Everything connected. Sunday evening, I received a text from my friend Veronica, who worked in HR. Just 3 words, check your email. The message had been sent to all staff at 6:42 p.m. Effective immediately, Gerald Hoffman had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation into compliance irregularities. All questions regarding operational matters should be directed to Helena Cartwright. All questions regarding regulatory matters should be directed to Michelle Reeves, who would be serving as acting VP of Compliance Operations. I read it twice. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, watching the city lights emerge as darkness fell. Monday morning. 7:15 a.m. I arrived early again, but this time to prepare for a different kind of day. Acting VP. The title felt both earned and surreal. Helena stopped by my office, Gerald's former office, now temporarily mine, at 8 o'clock sharp. Michelle. Thank you for your integrity in this situation. I was doing my job. You were doing more than your job. You were protecting this company. She settled into the chair across from my desk. The audit team found significant discrepancies in our filings. The State Compliance Office is imposing fines for the regulatory violations. Substantial fines. How substantial? $640,000. Plus mandatory enhanced oversight for the next 18 months. Helena's expression was grim. This could have been catastrophic if it had gone undetected longer. If we'd continued with flawed filings, we'd be looking at criminal liability. The number was staggering. More than Gerald's entire annual salary. What happens now? Gerald has been terminated. The board met via emergency session yesterday evening. We're conducting a full compliance review across all departments, and you'll be leading it. She paused. They'd like to offer you the VP position permanently. Assuming you're interested. Assuming I'm interested. 3 days ago, I'd been excluded from an audit team. Told someone else was sharper than me. Now I was being offered the position of the man who'd said it. I'm interested, I said quietly. But I need authority to implement real changes. No more flexible interpretations. No more overriding compliance protocols for convenience. You'll have full authority. The board understands we need someone who prioritizes regulatory integrity over appearances. We discussed logistics for another 20 minutes. Staff restructuring, audit remediation, communication strategies. Professional, necessary, almost mundane. After Helena left, I sat alone in my new office, looking at the familiar space from an unfamiliar angle. 9:37 a.m. The door burst open without warning. Gerald stood in the doorway, face flushed, eyes wild. He'd gained access to the building somehow, old badge still working, or he'd tailgate behind someone. Security oversights to address later. Why did the auditors fine us? His voice carried down the hallway, sharp with fury and desperation. You did this. You sabotaged me. I stood slowly, keeping my desk between us. I reported compliance violations. That's not sabotage. That's my responsibility. You deliberately flagged those reports. You went around me directly to the state office. I identified discrepancies that required regulatory attention. You modified official submissions without proper documentation or approval. Those modifications violated reporting standards. My voice remained level, each word precise. You did this, Gerald. I just stopped covering for you. Covering for me? I made this department. You were nothing but a file clerk when I hired you. You made this department by leveraging my expertise while taking credit for my work. And now you've endangered this company through your negligence and arrogance. He took a step forward. I held my ground. Do you have any idea what you've done? I'm finished in this industry. The fines, the termination, my reputation is destroyed. Good, I thought. Maybe the next analyst you work with won't spend 3 years cleaning up your mistakes. But I said, you destroyed your own reputation by prioritizing ego over ethics. I simply documented the truth. You cold, vindictive. Mr. Hoffman. Helena appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 security officers. Her voice cut through his tirade like a blade. You're no longer employed here, and you're currently trespassing. These officers will escort you from the building. If you return, we'll file formal charges. For a moment, Gerald looked like he might argue further. Then something crumbled in his expression. He looked at me one last time, not with anger anymore, but with the dawning realization of consequences. The security team escorted him out. Helena turned to me. Are you all right? I'm fine. And surprisingly, I was. No shaking hands, no racing heart. Just calm certainty. Thank you for the backup. Always. She paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, you handled that with remarkable composure. After she left, I sat back down and took a long breath. Sharper with details than you. The phrase echoed in my memory, but it had lost its sting. It had become something else entirely, evidence of profound miscalculation. The following weeks blurred together in a cascade of restructuring. I promoted Stephanie to senior analyst, recognizing her willingness to question irregularities rather than ignore them. We hired 2 additional compliance specialists and rebuilt our protocols from the ground up. The regulatory oversight was intensive but fair. We demonstrated our commitment to corrective action, implementing transparency measures that actually strengthened our operational integrity. The company weathered the fines, absorbed the lessons, emerged more resilient. And I found my rhythm in leadership, not the kind Gerald had practiced, built on intimidation and credit theft, but something else. Collaborative. Empowering. Rooted in the belief that compliance wasn't about control, but about creating frameworks that protected everyone. 3 months later, I attended a professional conference in Seattle. Networking event on the second evening, the usual mixture of small talk and industry gossip. A colleague from a competing firm approached me. Michelle Reeves. I heard about the situation at Gold Coast. Impressive handling of a difficult circumstance. Thank you. I also heard Gerald Hoffman's been struggling to find new placement. Word travels in this industry, especially about compliance failures. He sipped his drink. Some people are saying you orchestrated his downfall deliberately. Sabotage. I met his gaze steadily. Some people confuse accountability with sabotage. Gerald made choices that violated regulatory standards. I simply ensured those choices were properly documented and addressed. Fair enough. He nodded slowly. Still, it takes courage to challenge leadership like that. Not everyone would have done it. Not everyone has to rebuild their credibility after being told they're not sharp enough for their own job. I smiled slightly. Turns out I'm sharper than anyone realized. He laughed. I'd say so. Your company's lucky to have you. Let me tell you what I learned. Systems, whether compliance protocols or workplace hierarchies, function on assumptions. People assume you'll stay silent about irregularities. They assume you'll prioritize comfort over accuracy. They assume your patience means you won't act. Gerald assumed my compliance work was about protecting him. He never considered I might be documenting vulnerabilities for a different purpose. The moment he excluded me, dismissed my expertise, replaced me with someone he thought would be more pliable, that was the moment he activated his own audit. I didn't sabotage him. I simply let the system do what systems do when the truth is properly illuminated. He built his career on my work. I built his exit from the evidence he created. There's a particular satisfaction in watching someone face the consequences of their own actions, especially when those actions were taken with such arrogant certainty. 6 months after Gerald's termination, Gold Coast Technologies received official clearance from the State Compliance Office. Enhanced oversight lifted. Our regulatory standing fully restored. I stood in my office, no longer acting, no longer temporary, reviewing the closure documentation. Clean audits across all departments. Updated protocols functioning smoothly. Team morale higher than it had been in years. Stephanie knocked on my doorframe. Got a minute? Always. What's up? I wanted to thank you. She settled into the chair across from my desk. For not throwing me under the bus during the audit. You could have blamed me for the reporting errors, since I was the one who made some of the final submissions. You made those submissions based on Gerald's instructions. You're not responsible for his decisions. Still. You protected me when you could have used me as a scapegoat. That meant something. I considered her words. Compliance isn't about blame. It's about accuracy and accountability. You were accurate when it mattered, during the audit interviews. That's what counts. She smiled. I'm learning a lot from you. About the work, but also about how to lead. After she left, I turned to the window, watching afternoon sunlight paint the city in amber tones. How to lead. Gerald had led through control and credit theft. I was learning to lead through clarity and empowerment. Different systems. Different outcomes. That evening, I met Veronica for dinner at our favorite restaurant downtown. We'd been friends since college, maintained contact through career changes and life transitions. So, she said, raising her wine glass. To Michelle Reeves, VP of Compliance Operations. How does it feel? Earned, I answered honestly. And surprising. And right. What's next? World domination? I laughed. Just continued compliance excellence. Maybe some industry-speaking engagements. Building the kind of department I wish I'd worked in from the start. You know, Veronica said thoughtfully, I've seen a lot of workplace drama in HR, harassment complaints, discrimination cases, retaliation scenarios. Your situation was unique. You didn't just defend yourself, you protected the entire company while doing it. I protected the truth. The company protection was a side effect. Still counts. She studied me across the table. Are you really okay? No regrets about how things went down? I thought about Gerald's face in those final moments. The fury and desperation. The realization that his actions had consequences he couldn't charm or manipulate his way around. Did I feel guilty? No. Satisfied? Absolutely. I'm more than okay, I said. I'm exactly where I should be. Have you ever rebuilt yourself from someone else's dismissal? It's transformative. Not in some dramatic, movie montage way. But in the quiet recognition that your value doesn't depend on whether others acknowledge it. Your expertise exists independently of validation. Gerald thought he could diminish me by exclusion. He thought declaring me less sharp would make it true. Instead, he gave me the clarity to act without hesitation. Without doubt. Without the burden of loyalty to someone who'd never earned it. I didn't destroy his career out of revenge. I protected regulatory integrity because that's my professional obligation. That his career was built on compliance violations was his problem, not mine. The system worked exactly as designed once the right information reached the right people. A year after the audit, Gold Coast Technologies was featured in a compliance industry publication as a model for effective regulatory restructuring. They interviewed me about our protocols, our transparency initiatives, our commitment to ethical reporting. The article quoted me, "Compliance isn't about restricting operations, it's about creating frameworks that allow organizations to function with integrity and confidence. When everyone understands the standards and commits to upholding them, the system protects itself." My parents called after the article published. proud, delighted, full of questions about the work. "We always knew you were detail-oriented," my mother said. "Even as a child, you'd correct errors in your homework assignments before submitting them." "Quality control starts early," I joked. But after the call ended, I thought about that tendency. The careful documentation. The thorough review. The instinct to verify rather than assume. Those weren't just personality traits. They were survival skills in an industry, and a world, where people like Gerald thrived by exploiting others' work. I'd turned my compliance expertise inward, auditing not just financial systems but power structures. And when the audit revealed violations, I'd filed my report. The system had responded accordingly. So what happens now? I continue the work. Building frameworks, training analysts, ensuring that the next person who questions irregularities has support rather than dismissal. I speak at conferences about compliance ethics and regulatory integrity. I mentor junior analysts who remind me of myself 3 years ago: talented, thorough, underestimated. I've established protocols that prevent the kind of modifications Gerald routinely made. Not through restriction, but through transparency and documentation requirements that make irregularities immediately visible. And sometimes, late at night in my office, I pull up that original email. The one from 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. The notification that excluded me from the audit team. I don't read it out of bitterness. I read it as a reminder. One decision. One dismissive comment. One man's arrogance. That's all it took to activate a complete system reversal. Recently, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. A compliance analyst at a different company, asking for career advice. "I'm in a situation where my supervisor is cutting corners on regulatory reporting," she wrote. "I've raised concerns, but I'm being told I'm too cautious, too rigid in my interpretations. I'm worried about speaking up further because I don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. What would you do?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back. "Document everything. Every conversation, every concern, every irregularity. Keep your own records, separate from shared systems. Trust your expertise. If something seems wrong, it probably is. And remember that protecting regulatory integrity isn't troublemaking. It's your job. The system only works when people have the courage to activate it correctly. If your supervisor is compromising compliance, document it and report it through proper channels. Your professional responsibility outweighs loyalty to someone who's violating standards. You're not too cautious. You're exactly as vigilant as the role requires. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I paused, then added. "And if they try to exclude you or diminish your expertise for doing your job? Document that too. Sometimes the most important audit is the one you conduct on your own behalf." She responded within an hour, "Thank you. I needed to hear this. This is what I know now. Your silence is someone else's safety net. Your patience is someone else's permission. Your professionalism can be mistaken for compliance with misconduct. Until you decide otherwise." Gerald thought he'd sidelined me. Instead, he'd freed me from any remaining obligation to protect him. He'd given me the clarity and motivation to act on what I'd been carefully documenting for years. He'd excluded me from an audit. So I conducted one of my own. The results spoke for themselves. I still work at Gold Coast Technologies. Still lead our compliance department. Still arrive early and stay late, because precision takes time and attention. But now I do it in an environment I've helped rebuild. Where regulatory integrity is valued rather than viewed as an inconvenience. Where analysts are encouraged to question irregularities rather than suppress them. Where no one is told they're not sharp enough for work they've mastered. Sometimes I walk past Gerald's old office, now occupied by our new CFO, someone who understands that compliance is partnership, not opposition. I remember standing in that doorway, being told I'd been replaced because someone else was sharper. I remember the cold clarity that followed. I remember making a decision. 3 days. That's all it took from dismissal to consequence. 72 hours between his sneer and his security escort from the building. Was it calculated? Absolutely. Was it justified? The regulatory audit, the fines, his termination, all of that stemmed directly from his own actions. I simply ensured those actions received proper scrutiny. Was it satisfying? Yes. More than I can adequately express.